Hello, boys and ghouls. Irish Blackstone here with another episode of Behind the Keyboard. Today, my guest is Rick Poldark, another Severed Press author who has two books out, Primordial Island and Return to Primordial Island. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. All right. Thanks for being here, Rick.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's always a pleasure to have a new author. Okay, Primordial Island. Love the title, and I love the cover. Where did it all come from?
The title actually, I chose that. It was through a big marketing effort. I noticed that metadata is very important for sales, and so is the title and the cover art. Same thing with the cover art. It was all based on a search that I did. I kind of conducted a search on the best-selling books about dinosaurs with the words that were in their titles, and what the cover is actually depicted, because there are patterns that you see, certain patterns that are hot and certain patterns that are not, and
Mm-hmm.
that changes. It always shifts. So you have to keep a close eye on it. So I noticed any title that had the word primordial or island in it, and there were some other words also,
Mm.
tended to sell. They belong to bestsellers, and books that depicted a dinosaur on the cover, particularly a T-Rex, also tended to belong to covers of books that sold really well. So I put together Primordial Island because it fits the story perfectly. And that guy who's actually behind me, who's trying to eat me right now, um, he's actually a main character in the book, so it works. And
Okay.
that's how I came up with that.
Okay. Well, it makes sense that the T Rex is, the T Rex would be, putting a T Rex on the cover would make it help it and get more eyes on it because the T Rex is just fucking awesome.
Oh, he's a classic. He's a classic.
Yeah, I mean, if they had put the Brachiosaurus or a Velociraptor on the cover on the poster for Jurassic Park, no one
Right.
would care.
Right. Especially a Brachiosaurus.
Yeah,
Velociraptor, maybe. Right.
but most people. But I remember for me, Jurassic Park was the first time I ever heard of a Velociraptor. So you know,
Right. Same here. Yep.
and I mean, you've also got Return to Primordial Island, which of course that's the sequel.
Right.
And I mean, just looking at the cover, to that one, you've got the Spinosaurus instead.
Correct. Yes. And
Okay.
it's interesting that came about because I always look at the reviews, and one of the reviews was, it was a good review, but the reviewer said, I'd like to see some aquatic dinosaurs in the next one. And I was writing it at the time, like, all right, I'm going to build in. That's true. I should have aquatic dinosaurs in there. And what's a famous aquatic dinosaur? The Spinosaurus. He was huge. Some would say that he was actually more of an apex predator than the T Rex.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's and doing the cover art, we wanted to keep the color palette similar, so it looks like they're all part of the same series. We wanted the font of the lettering to be very similar, so it looks like the two books go together, and that's how we came up with that.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I still okay. Going back to Jurassic Park again, I remember watching Jurassic Park 3, and when the Spinosaurus
Yes.
spotted for an old movie, but when it kills the T Rex, I was shell shocked by that.
Yep. And then it's you automatically go online to see, did this thing really kill T Rexes? And yes, it did.
Oh yes. So why dinosaurs?
I've loved dinosaurs ever since I was a kid. For most people, it's a phase. I'm still waiting for the end of my phase. It's 44 years later. They're just awesome. The fact that these things once walked the earth. I mean, they look ridiculous. They look insane. It's that something like this was real. Something these things that were that big and that fierce, and even the herbivores. I mean, they were amazing. They were humongous. They so alien compared to everything, every other. I mean, I love reptiles too. I owned an iguana for 11 years.
Oh wow.
Best
Okay.
pet I ever had. His name was Genghis. He was adorable. Um, really smart. Really smart. He learned how to open. We had a wine closet with like a door with a glass in the front. He learned how to reach in, just like in Jurassic Park, with his claws and undo the latch, and he would open it and hide in there. and you could always tell he was in there because his tail would stick out. But he swore he was hidden, that nobody could find him.
Of course.
So I've just always found their physiology. I mean, they're as old as time itself. They're still around. Some of them haven't changed all that much. Some of them they think may have evolved into birds
Yep.
and other kinds of things. The field of comparative anatomy is very interesting. You look at all the hollow spaces and even it's funny, all the theories about dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, right? When that book came out and the movie, a physician wrote it. It's a classic. It was thought to be very well researched, and it was thought to be very accurate. But like any science, we're always learning, we're always evolving. And paleontology, we're starting to realize things that we thought were true actually have been disproven, or there's a big question mark next to it. For example, a T Rex. Did a T Rex roar? In the movies, they always show him roaring.
Yep.
If you're a predator and you're hungry and you're waiting in the bushes and you're looking at your prey, are you going to announce, hey, I'm here and I'm hungry and I'm huge? You're not going to roar and then attack your prey. So they thought that now they think, given the empty spaces in its skull, that they did more of a closed mouth vocalization. And there was a scientist who actually piped air through a closed T-Rex skull. And it's a very low rumble that it's believed that we're evolutionarily hardwired to be terrified of that. It's a terrifying sound because of the T-Rex, to the point where horror movies, in the background of their soundtrack, they use that frequency to induce dread in their audiences.
I remember, okay, so, I live in Mexico and I had to fly back to Australia in 2018. And I remember on the flight, they had a documentary about what the T-Rex really sounded like. And it went into that sort of closed mouth vocalization. And I remember I'm on the plane, massive headphones on, the volume as loud as possible. And they said, and this is what it would have sounded. And that subsonic rumble, all that went through my head was, this is going to be, if this plane just crashed, this will be the last sound I'll ever hear. And I am shitting my pants.
And that's exactly how Primordial Island begins, with the plane crash and hearing that sound. So it's interesting that you bring that up.
it's on my I've got both books on my TBR list. That's the thing.
Cool.
And I mean, when I get, unfortunately, the list is massive and it grows every week. When I get to it, I'm going to be posting reviews on on my YouTube channel for them.
Awesome.
Because just like you, I love dinosaurs, and I'm not waiting for that to end because I know it never will.
It should never end.
Exactly. I'm actually going to be writing at some point a Australian dinosaur story.
Nice.
With an Australian dinosaur, doing all the research. I'm like, never heard of this thing. This sounds awesome.
Cool.
Because when you think of dinosaurs, you do think of more central, like in the USA, than anywhere else.
Right.
And I mean, I think Jurassic Park is part of that with, everything. So for you, Primordial Island, the story for Primordial Island, where did that come from?
Remember when that Malaysian flight went down, the plane went down and they couldn't find it? So that got my brain working and thinking, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, where could it have gone? How come with all the technology that we have today, how come we can't locate this plane? And then I did this deep dive. It was like I went down the rabbit hole. I started researching, emergency locator transmitter technology that's in the tail of airplanes, and cartography and satellite imaging. I'm like, with all the satellites we have in the sky, how can we not find this thing? And then the more research I did, I saw that emergency locator transmitter technology is pretty fallible. And in fact, it's not really required generally, or the requirements, it depends on where you're talking about, are very outdated. So we do have newer, better technology, but it's not a requirement. So it's not put in planes.
Okay.
So for example, traditional ELT technology, when a plane crashes, a message goes to trigger it to send a relay to a satellite, and then, a distress signal gets sent. But if the plane flips upside down, if it's submerged in water, there's all these different conditions that would actually either fool or deactivate inadvertently the ELT transmitter. So that was interesting. And then when it comes to cartography and satellite imaging, there are huge gaps on this planet. Yes, we have satellites in the air, but we tend to map and surveil the areas where it's profitable to do so,
Mm.
where, where you have these big wide open spaces where nothing's really going on. It's pretty much ignored. So then all of a sudden you have this, it is, even in this day and age, it could be possible to have an uncharted island. And then I actually have an explanation behind that too. It isn't just an uncharted island that sat there undetected all this time. There's an actual science fiction-y kind of explanation for it. But
Okay.
an island could pop up out of nowhere and no one would see it for quite some time. So then, like, my brain, the way my brain works is, well, what if, this plane landed on the island and it's filled with dinosaurs and indigenous tribes and supernatural kinds of things? And then I just started sitting down and writing it.
Okay. That sounds really good.
And it's all because of that news story. It's really weird. It's I've always kind of written for fun.
Hmm.
And then that was the first time I'm like, let me write a novel. Let me see what happens. And this happened.
Okay, so you write it and then you submit it to Severed Press.
Well, after I have beta readers that I
Hmm.
submitted it to first. My wife had a look at it. She showed it to her friend without telling me who used to be in publishing,
Hmm.
and she's like, he should submit this. This is pretty good. And I have a friend. He actually passed away from COVID back in
Oh,
November.
I'm sorry to hear
But
that.
thank you. Great guy, and no regard for my feelings whatsoever, which I love. I told him, be brutally honest, because if there's something wrong with it, I want to know so I can
Yep.
fix it. And he did point out certain things, and he was right. He was absolutely right. And I fixed it up. And, you go over it a bunch of times. And then there's that big leap where you say, all right, I'm going to try and submit this to a publisher. And I saw Severed Press online, and they fit the exact genre that I want to do. And I'm like, oh, I have to submit to them. And they loved it. So, and then they publish it, and they did a great job. I mean, the editing process is very professional, very nicely done. The cover art, their covers are incredible.
Oh yeah.
I love and I love these covers that they did for me. It's I couldn't be happier, because cover art's important too. That's the first thing people see when
Oh
they're on
yeah.
Amazon or they're looking at your book. And it needs to be tight. It needs to be good. And I couldn't be happier. It's perfect.
And I mean, with Severed, they do come to you and say, can you do you have ideas for the cover?
Yes.
So you said you did your research and you
Yep.
came up with, okay, it's got to be the T-Rex and it's got to have Primordial. Was there a lot of variations on the cover, or was it basically like the first version? It was like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
It was it was the first version for both of them, actually. Matt
Wow.
James did the cover for the first one, and the guy behind me right now.
Yep.
And it's incredible. It's a wraparound cover, which is cool. It wraps around to the back, and then you have the back book blurb. I Severed sends it to me, and he's like, "How's this?" I'm like, I'm like, "Wow." I showed it to my wife. She goes, "Oh yeah." She's like, "That's it."
Yep.
Same thing with the second one. The same thing with the second one was just perfect. I couldn't pull it apart. I couldn't complain.
Yep. I know that I'm looking at both of them right now, and yeah, they are beautiful. And I mean, I'm a big T-Rex fan, but the one with the Return to Primordial Island just looks even more badass.
Yes, very badass, very dramatic. And then the German rights were sold, publishing rights, foreign language rights were sold to Lucifer Verlag, and they did a really cool cover. I'm like, well, what are they going to do that's different? And they actually did. It's a T-Rex. The color scheme is a little different, and it
Yep.
has the plane going down in flames behind the T-Rex as it's roaring in the air, which is like, wow, that's another twist on it. And I love them all. All the covers are
Oh
fantastic.
yeah. Um, yeah. Now, those are good. Those are really good. Sorry. And Return to Primordial Island. Don't go into spoilers,
Right.
okay? But the story for okay, you said that You read you read reviews for the first one, and you took some of those ideas and said, yeah, you're right, I'm gonna put those in. The basic idea for Return to Primordial Island, where'd that come from?
Return. All right, so you have the first excursion to the island, and of course you have those who died and those who survived, and you would say, why the hell would anybody who survived that go back? And there is some unfinished business. There is some survivor's guilt. It has to do with the relationships that were forged in
Mm-hmm.
the first one. And then, of course, there's money and corporate greed and all that kind of stuff. Just because some of the main characters who got off doesn't mean that the island was left alone. I mean, people, you find an island like that, someone's going to be continuing to research it and work it and exploit it.
Of course. Okay, so so it's got a bit of a Lost World, Jurassic Park 2 kind of vibe there. Why go back?
Right, exactly. And then the second one, I threw in some more. The first one involves an indigenous tribe that lives on the island, and the dinosaurs, and there's like a lizard species, and then there's yet another species that comes out, and you start to find out the island is a lot more complex.
Hmm.
The first book kind of like skim the edge of it, and the second book you really get into the mythology of the island, and that's where some more of the supernatural and horror elements come in, the fantasy elements. I love
Okay.
sci-fi and fantasy. I'm a dungeon master. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I play Pathfinder, and so it felt like I got to be a dungeon master again,
Yep.
and the characters were my players, and I'm kind of putting them through the paces.
I think that's something for anyone who creates, especially specifically writers. I think we have a god complex.
Absolutely. But the characters sometimes do things that we don't want them to do. Or so you'll be writing a scene and you put them in a dangerous situation and you think you know how that you're going to get them out of it. And either it may not work or they do something as you're writing. I don't really plot or outline much. I just kind of do it and
Yep.
see what happens, see what my characters do. I do outline my characters. I want to know, I want to have a very good idea of who my characters are because that's important because they're going to drive the story. I like character driven. I mean, there's a plot, there's a very serious plot, a very detailed plot, but it's about the characters more so than the plot. And sometimes they do things that I don't anticipate. I'm like, oh man, how am I gonna get around this now? And it forces me to be creative. But then if I'm thinking that as the writer, as the quote unquote deity of my little world, what are the readers going to think? It's really going to seem organic and shock
Yep.
them. Like, oh, how are they going to get out of this? Whereas if you know how they're going to get out of it before you even get into it, it's going to seem very telegraphed, very choreographed. I always found it odd in interviews when famous authors say, well, I knew the ending before
Mm.
I even started it. And it's like, well, then you got to, all right, if you know your starting point and you know the end, you got to get there. You got to build the bridge.
Yep.
What if it doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go? Then does that ending still work? And I guess they make it work, but that wasn't my experience.
Oh no, I get that because I mean that was so you're not a plotter. You are a
I'm a
pantser.
pantser.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Die in the wool pantser.
absolutely. A little bit of outlining, like for the characters.
Okay.
Like I want to know. I have like little dossiers on them, and then once I feel like I have a good sense of who they are, then I throw them into the mix and kind of see what happens. So
Yep.
it's a very bottom up kind of rather than top down kind of
Okay. All right.
process.
Okay. See, I'm the opposite. I'll do not like a very in-depth outline. I'll basically do like a couple sentences per paragraph kind of thing, per chapter, not paragraph. um, and and for me, if I outline it, that's not 100% the way it is going to go because I know I'll get to a point and I'll go, you know what? The characters are doing something completely different. They're doing their own thing. This is a million times better than what I originally planned.
Right. And that
I'm just going to,
happens.
let's see what
Yep.
happens.
Yep. And it's
Um,
great when that happens because it's all of a sudden this amazing stuff comes out. It's like, wow, that's better than what I ever planned.
oh yes. Although there was a short story I had written where that happened. I was like, well, that ending was shit.
The ending is key. You have to know where to end it, how to end it, and
Yep.
that I labored probably of all the parts of writing this book. Well, both of them was how am I going to end this? Because I don't know if at the end of the first one, is there going to be a sequel? Is there not going to be a sequel? I'd love to write a sequel. Will Severed want me to write a sequel? It ends up they did. But I had to also give it a natural ending because one thing when I did a lot of research when in my spare time, I kind of just look at reviews of different
Mm.
books that are similar and any genre that I'm interested in. And I look at what people like. And I also look at the 1 and 2 star reviews. What did people not like? And people seem to not like the abrupt cliffhanger ending. It occasionally works, but in general, people like a little more explanation.
Yep.
So, book one has its natural ending, but you could tell it can go on, further, and it did. And then book two, same thing. It has a natural ending. Does it leave the door open for another? Sure. I mean, it's a big world that was created. I can keep going back as long as Severed will let me.
Of course. And I mean, so far, looking at the reviews for both, especially, and there's more often than not, everyone's like, "This is really good," as opposed to "This was terrible."
Thank goodness. Because it being my first book, once you get it out there, it's like, all right, I had all these people look over it. I went over it with a fine tooth comb. The editor went over it with a fine tooth comb. It's got a kick ass cover. It's got a kick ass title. And then it's like, you release your baby out into the world, and is it going to get eaten? Is it going to be devoured? Is it going to be shredded? And when the first few reviews start coming in, I started to breathe a sigh of relief. And
Yeah.
I mean, you always get those one or two, you always make choices as a writer. You're always going to make somebody unhappy with some choice that you make, but in general, yes, it seems to be pretty well received, which is nice.
Well, I mean, you got the two books out. You've got the foreign language version. You got the audio book as well.
Yeah, that was interesting. Just hearing it being narrated by somebody
Yeah.
was a cool experience. That was really that was awesome.
And okay, it's anytime something like that happens, yeah, it's awesome. Unfortunately, it's not happened for me yet. So forgive me, but you bastard.
You have no idea.
What was the process like for the audiobook?
That was I mean I wasn't really involved in it. It was Severed selected a reader,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure exactly how that went. It
Oh,
just
okay,
kind of
fair enough.
happened. Yeah, and I knew it was happening. I mean, Severed let me know that it was happening, and it just turned out great.
And for you, you said it was a little weird hearing the narration, like hearing your book being read by someone else.
Yeah,
When you say was it like good weird, or was it more like I
it
wouldn't
was
have read
good
it that
weird.
way? Okay, it was good weird. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was good weird. It was just like wow. I mean, he's a professional narrator. It's I know how I would read it,
Hmm.
but I'm not a professional narrator. I do have a good face for radio, but I've been told that.
I think that's a prerequisite for most authors. I mean, there are the few that do, they're the exception to the rules, and we will not mention them. But
Right. We hate them profusely, but
there
yes.
you go. So, you trying to find out other works by you. There's just those two books, the Primordial Island ones. I haven't found anything else. And
Oh, those are the only two. I'm working on another one right now. Um, book three might be in the pipeline. We'll see. Um, I'm really feeling this other book right now that Severed contracted me for.
okay,
It's gonna working title. It's called the Genesis Chamber.
ooh,
Takes place in Mexico.
if you
Excaret.
okay, if you need if you want to pick the brain, because I've been living here for almost 5 years now, so I'm happy to.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I visited Excaret years ago.
Ooh,
My
okay.
wife and I, and we went swimming in the cenotes. And the interesting thing about the cenotes is it's an elaborate network of caverns, and some are open, some are closed. The open ones are the ones that caved in. over time.
Yeah.
But you get these underground rivers and volcanic tubes, and you know what else happened in around the Yucatan Peninsula is that's where the asteroid they think hit that wiped out the dinosaurs. So I can have a lot of fun with that
Oh
area.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, did you ever go to Teotihuacan with the two big ass ancient pyramids near Mexico City?
No.
Okay, these are like massive. When I say massive, like massive, you can't really fathom it. Anyway, I always had this great idea for a cover of one of those big ancient pyramids with a T-Rex on top roaring into the sky.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Top
just
of the
got,
world.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically, I just gotta figure out, okay, what's the story that goes with that?
Right. Right. And it's cool. I mean, I guess that's how ideas can start, right? It's
Well, that was the thing. I mean, Primordial Island for you was a airline tragedy.
I'm a horrible person.
You're a writer.
Yes.
There's, you look. There's that book by, I don't know if you ever read it. Jack Ketchum wrote this book called The Girl Next Door, which is the
No.
most brutal, horrific thing you ever read, based on a true event that actually happened. And when you read the actual facts about what really happened, it's a million times worse.
Wow. Yeah, when you do research for stuff like that, sure, it
Yeah.
could get pretty gnarly.
Oh yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Um, so you got your Genesis project, possible Primordial Island 3 book. And is there anything else that you're working on, or is it just that's really it for now?
That's pretty much it for now. I did do a short story that I submitted to a Horror Writers Association anthology. I don't know the status if it was accepted
Mhm.
yet or not, but it's a ghost anthology.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, all right, how do I do a ghost story? So I, emailed the editor and I said, no one's ever done a I'm stuck on dinosaurs. I'm the dinosaur guy. I'm like, no one's ever done a story about a ghost of a dinosaur, and they're buried around here. I mean, why not have a dinosaur ghost? And he's like, you know what? He's like, that would be awesome. He says, submit that. And I worked on this story about it. Actually takes place out on a cattle ranch out west, um, where cows are going missing, and these two ranch hands have to kind of track down because you get reimbursed by the government if you can find corpses, and you have packs of wolves. Then in the research I did, I saw that wolves are being reintroduced out there, and a lot of the ranchers don't like it. But the
Okay.
government is reimbursing people, but you have to photographically document the corpses. So they go out to photographically document this corpse, and the way I'll leave it is they kind of find something else. They're expecting a pack of wolves, and they're starting to realize it's something much bigger and much worse.
Okay, that sounds good actually. That sounds actually really good. So with writing that compared, writing a short story to a novel, which one do you prefer?
I prefer writing the novel because you have a lot of room to build characters in the story. The short story, it was fun, but the word economy is killer. I mean, you have to hit the ground running.
Yep.
You gotta basically big time show don't tell. I mean, you should always do show don't tell, but you get to know the characters immediately through their actions. You can't, do all this exposition and
Uh-huh.
background, and you got to wrap it up. I mean, coming up with an ending after, at the end of 5,000 words is very different than coming up with an ending after 70,000 words.
Yep.
And you got to nail it. And I actually rewrote that ending 4 times.
Oh wow.
4 different endings. And the last one was the one, because the others were okay. They got progressively better. They all went in very different directions. And then that last one was it. That's I have a son, he's 13. He loves this kind of stuff too. So I would run each one by him. I'm like, what do you think? And he'd say, that one's okay. That one's a little better. And that last one, he says, yes, that's it. And then I showed my wife, and yes, that's it. And my friend, he passed away from COVID, so I can't show him. But that's the tricky part. It's
Yep.
the word economy and nailing that ending.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, totally agree. See, for me, a short story for me is like maybe 10,000 words. I consider that to be a short story. Anything under 10,000 words, and I'm going to struggle.
It's tough. It really is. Where do you begin? It's not just how you end. Where do you begin? And then
Oh,
you'll
yeah.
write a beginning, and then you go back and you look when you're hitting that word limit, and then you're like, oh, maybe I can shave a little off the beginning. It doesn't, have to take place right there. You can jump right into it more. There's a lot of shaving that goes on with the novel. It's kind of, I just kind of like vomited it out, so to speak, and then you shape it and shine it up as you
Yeah.
go. With this, it's like you have to constantly go back and, all right, that was a bad starting point. I got to move it a little bit. And oh, I got to move it a little bit more. I got to tighten the ending. I can only focus on one or two encounters. I can't have this big, it has to take place within a couple of hours. It can't be an all day or over the course of a week. Maybe you could, but it'd be more difficult.
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. And speaking about your process, well, actually, do you have a process?
Uh, I guess. I mean, yeah.
I mean, because I spoke to Tim Meyer, and he doesn't have a set process for everything he writes. It varies and from book to book.
Right.
You know, so that's why I said, do you have a process? Because I, there's a
I guess it was different because one was a sequel. So for book one, I had the basic idea, but it was about the characters. I
yep,
didn't want to start writing until I built up characters that I liked. And it was finding, I didn't just want them to be all paleontologists, because then it would be like, with Star Wars with the prequels, it's all Jedi. It's very one note. It's very dull.
yep,
You need that human element. You need Han Solo. You need the Wookiee. You need all the different Lando Calrissian, so that different types of readers can identify with somebody different.
yep,
So I had the paleontologists were given. I had a biologist. I had a paleobotanist. Sorry, those are the scientists, and I gave them their personalities. But then I needed like what if one of us who knows nothing about that or very little about this stuff landed on this island? How would we react? You need
yep.
that's the reality factor. The average person that your reader can relate to. And that's the first character that you meet. He's the one survivor of the plane crash. And he kind of wakes up on this island and he's trying to get his bearings and he's injured. And then he has his first encounter right there with one of the figures.
Hmm.
And does he know it's a dinosaur when he first sees it? What does he think it is? I mean, if you saw something like that in real life, I mean, you look at it, oh yeah, I would know that's a dinosaur. I don't know, would you, if it really happened?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it just a monster? Is it a really large animal? He's disoriented from the crash. Is he hallucinating?
Oh
Um,
yeah, I'm positive in that situation. Your instinct is not, oh yeah, that's a T-Rex. It's
right,
not going to be that. It's going to be, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. What the hell is this thing?
right. And then I had some fun with the whole Jurassic Park thing and what we know or thought we knew about dinosaurs is all right. Is he going to run fast? Stay still. His vision is based on movement. Is it? There's kind of a funny part there. It's kind of, well, I don't want to give it away,
Oh no,
but
no, no. Please don't, because
yeah, I poke a lot of fun. And I mean, and with total respect, I love Jurassic
yeah,
Park. Michael Crichton was a brilliant writer. Um, but I had some fun with it because a lot of a lot of the stuff we thought was correct actually we find out probably wasn't.
oh yeah,
And then you go back and forth, and I have some fun with that. There were what dinosaurs, what we thought they were, what we think they are now, and then it's what I want them to be as an author because these are my dinosaurs.
yeah,
So you have to figure out. You got to come up with your own set of rules and try not to violate them. And if you do, you have to have a good reason. Um, and I like to write third person close or third person limited because you're seeing. I have a big cast of characters, and you're seeing what's happening through the eyes of different characters and their experiences and their knowledge. And as a reader, you're getting little pieces of it. I'm kind of leading you along, and you're piecing it together as you go. You're not going to know everything. There's no bird's eye view of what's happening in these books.
yeah. and that makes it that as you said, makes the tension, brings it the tension up, and the audience discovers everything as they do.
Right. It's very experiential. Yep.
Yep. And I mean, if it's going to be a big spoiler, don't answer properly. But was there any moments when you were writing, when you were writing, but when you were writing both Primordial Island books, that you sat there with a big grin on your face, going, "Oh yeah, I'm a bastard for this."
Yes. I mean, people die, characters die. And I was surprised because I've seen in reviews for other authors that I like or read that, some readers get really pissed off when somebody they like dies or somebody they identify with. I tried to give people heroic deaths
Mhm.
if they deserved it. And then sometimes accidents happen. It's or chance. Yeah, there are certain deaths. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna make some people really pissed off about this, but it hasn't really happened. They're taking it in stride.
Mhm.
No one's complained about character deaths,
Okay.
but there is a love triangle,
Ooh.
and I got a lot of feedback about that. It goes across both books. And when I finish book one, it leaves off in a certain place. It may or may not be the definitive ending of that love triangle. And then I got all this feedback in the reviews. Well, I think, so you have Peter, you have Tracy, and you have Mary. Those are your three. That's your love triangle. And basically, I use the romance as kind of like the island and predator prey relationships as a metaphor for romance. Uh, so, so you have Peter, who's, he's the guy, and traditionally in pulp stories, the guy is this big, strapping, muscular guy, and he just takes the women that he wants, and they're these helpless damsels. And, I kind of turn that, this is 2020. So I
Yep.
wanted, or back then, 2019, I wanted to kind of turn that on its head because it is very dated. So I'm like, well, what if he's this really timid, nerdy guy? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm a nerd. I love it. I say that affectionately, not disparagingly. But what if he's this really timid, nerdy guy and they're the predators and they're kind of competing for him? And they each have their own personality without getting too much into it. I don't want to give it away. But it was interesting to see in the reviews at the end of the first book. Well, I thought Mary should have gotten him, or I thought Tracy should have gotten him. And they go into their reasons why. And that I'm like, wow, that love triangle, it was a subplot, but it ends up that really resonated with a lot of the readers, the majority of them. So the second book, I had to kind of go in there, and besides, the island and going back and what they discover, there's still this love triangle that exists, and how does that work out? So that was very interesting because I don't see myself ever writing pure romance. I need
Mhm.
to have like zombies or dinosaurs or evil robots or something in there
You need to make it
with it.
interesting.
Right, exactly. But I do like romance. I don't know, it's kind of cool. I like love stories if they're done well.
Well, it's just funny when you said there was a love triangle. For some reason, in my head, I was thinking, please don't let it be with a T-Rex.
Primordial Island 3. Huh.
You could do the sexy spin-off. Dinosaurs Gone Wild.
I'm sure that, I mean, there's a lot of Sasquatch romance books out there, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to look because I'll probably end up on some watch list. Maybe there are dinosaur romance books out there with human dinosaurs. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
My mind went to a really weird place. Anyway, um, so what? Oh no. There's going to be someone in the comments when this video goes up. Someone in the comments will probably say, "Yes, there is. Here's the link."
Right, exactly. And then follow that link at your peril.
Yes, exactly. So, with writing Primordial Island and Return to Primordial Island, what was the hardest part for you?
A lot of research. I wanted to get it right. This was my take on dinosaurs, but it has to be somewhat correct. You can't just completely go a different direction. There was a lot to play with because there's a lot of theories, that are kind of unanswered. There's evidence supporting, was a T-Rex a scavenger or was it a hunter?
Yep.
You have both sides of that argument. Some say both. Did they have feathers? Did they not have feathers? One reviewer didn't like the feathers part. He's like, I like the book a lot, but don't put feathers on a T-Rex. Never put feathers on a T-Rex. And I'm like, all right. I'm surprised it was only the one, the one reviewer who brought that up. Because as I'm writing it, I'm kind of wincing as I'm like, typing it out. But you have to do a lot of research,
Yep.
not just on the dinosaurs and their behavior, but on predator prey ratios. If this is an island, am I showing enough prey? You can't just show all these predators ambling about and then there's only one or two prey
Yeah.
species around. There's actually certain ratios that exist in nature. I don't remember off the top of my head, it's in my notes, but you have to mimic that or the island wouldn't sustain itself.
Yep.
Researching the ELT technology, satellite imagery, cartography, that was in depth. Salvage operations, because that's what drives the story, is that these paleontologists go on the salvage operation to recover the flight recorder from this plane, and they encounter all the stuff that they encounter and they document it, and it's a scientific endeavor as well.
Yeah.
So there are certain politics surrounding salvage operations, even fossil finds. There are black markets, particularly in Asia. It's big because they don't have a lot of fossils over there. So there are some rich folks out there who pay a lot of money for this kind of stuff, rather than it going to museums. As far as grants and that kind of thing, you tend to get grants for intact finds rather than incomplete finds. Even though incomplete finds can actually give you a lot of data, nobody wants to pay for that because they want
Yep.
a nice complete skeleton in the museum. They don't want a piece of a skeleton. Very
Okay.
interesting stuff.
And from when you first had the initial idea to, when you finished the first draft, when you finished the draft, how much of that time was put into just research?
A lot. I did a lot of research before I started writing. And then as I would go, things would come up that I would say, oh, I got to do a little more research on
Yep.
that. I'm not entirely sure. And then you got to kind of stop and then do research on it. Or I'll jump to another scene and then come back, double back, and, fix that up. There were things that were evolving as I was writing it that I had to go back and adjust a little bit. Because, you can't write a novel in a month. Although I will tell you this, the first book took me about 7 to 8 months to write. So Severed Press, it was doing very well, and they said, "Let's strike while the iron's hot." We need another sequel, but can you get it to us like in a few months?
Ooh.
And normally I'd be like, hell no. But it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I wasn't working. I was at home. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. What else am I doing? Let me do something good with this. And I actually wrote the sequel, the rough draft, in 3 months, which was insane, but I had a lot of free time.
Yep.
And it was great. I got to get lost in my own head for a while and work out this story, which took me away from everything that was happening in the real world. And before you know it, there was a sequel. That was an interesting experience because to talk about process, it was a completely different, the first book, if I wrote, I don't write every day, but try to write every week, 3,000 words here, 2,000 words there.
Yep.
With the second book, with all that free time, there were some days I'm banging out, 5,000-6,000 words a day, not all in one sitting, of course,
No.
but it's, and some of it is, I think the reality is when you are working, now I'm back at work, of course, you don't have the time. And it's like, I tend to write at night when my wife and son go to bed, and that's when the house gets quiet and I can get lost in my own thoughts. But after, an hour or two of that, you get tired and you do have to wake up early the next day. Whereas, when I was writing the second book and I wasn't going to work, I could stay up all night and write and sleep in and do what I need to do. If I feel like I'm on a hot streak, I can just keep writing and writing and writing. So process wise, speaking of process, those two processes were very different. I like being back at work, although it was fun having that luxury of time for writing a book that way. I wish I could do that all the time, but I need to pay bills. I need to feed my family. They did eat last week, but I guess they want to eat this week too.
Yeah, they need to eat this week.
Yes.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, it's come up a couple of times because it is the dinosaur franchise everyone goes to. Do you think without Jurassic Park, do you think dinosaurs would be as popular as they are?
Probably not. I mean, you did have the Lost World, um, the original book, but it was more than, and that's kind of what Primordial Island is. It's not purely a dinosaur thing. There are supernatural elements, indigenous tribes, other species. It's kind of a big influence on me growing up was Land of the Lost,
Mm-hmm.
the series in the 70s, with the horrible special effects, but it was great. It was good, cheesy fun. I guess those are good effects back then. I mean, I was a kid then, so I don't know. I thought it was pretty darn cool, but yeah, nowadays it's corny. But I was kind of influenced by that Indiana Jones, and it's
Yep.
funny, you'll see in the reviews, this reminds me of Dungeons and Dragons, this was like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, or this reminded me a little bit of Indiana Jones with dinosaurs. The second book, I designed a escape room. I did my first escape room before all this happened, the pandemic,
Mm.
on vacation somewhere, and it was my wife, my son, and I, and it was the coolest thing. It was like Dungeons and Dragons without the combat.
Okay.
Um, Unless you want to count us arguing amongst each other as combat. Roll for initiative. But it was fun. So I'm like, let me throw that in there. It's kind of like what Indiana Jones had to do. There's booby traps. He had to disarm the booby traps. It's not just you got to find the artifact. There's some supernatural stuff. There's always supernatural stuff with that. Um, and that was the part I was a little concerned about. Some readers wanted more of the dinosaurs. There's plenty of dinosaur stuff, but this isn't just like a Jurassic Park story. It's bigger than that. There's a whole mythology behind the island, and it's more of a pulp kind of Dungeons and Dragonsy adventure type story.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. And where can the one or two people who are going to watch this, because the audience is still growing. It's not because of you. It's not because of you.
Okay.
Where can
Maybe I'll bring some in. We'll see.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
exactly.
Or scare them away. I don't know.
If this isn't scaring them away, you're fine. Where can everyone find you?
I'm on Facebook, Rick Poldark, Amazon. That's pretty much it. I don't do Twitter. I don't do social media, because I'd rather do just about anything else. I don't know. I'd rather be writing or
Yep.
running dungeon mastering a game, or playing with my son, or spending time with my wife, than being on Twitter or
yeah.
anything like that.
No,
Tweeting pictures of my lunch and stuff like that. I never understand that, but
that's just to make everyone else jealous about that you're having this awesome meal and they're not. That's all it is. It's just jealousy.
Okay. That's why I don't do it. I don't know. I eat a lot of salads and trying to be healthy, failing horribly, but trying.
Healthy's overrated.
My blood type is Rocky Road, but that's
a good blood type. All right, cool. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for being on, man.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Have a good one.
Yep, you too.
And once again, a very big thank you to Rick Poldark for being on today. You can find his books on Amazon.com. And once again, I'm Ira Blackstone. Thank you for watching Behind the Keyboard.